Hey everybody, welcome back to our third installment of Taco Talks. So I thought I'd start us off with, as quarantine continues to drag on. First, tacos, I forgot to mention. Today's taco we are enjoying is from Mateo's Taco Restaurant. It's an excellent taco, highly recommend. Don't eat it if you don't like cilantro. If you don't like cilantro, it's gonna taste like a big old soap bomb. To Mateo's Taqueria. Super chewy. So I think we'll start off today by just exploring what we've been doing to kill time during quarantine. I thought I'd share some of the things that I've been doing. First thing is I have definitely not created a TikTok dance.
Hey, so you bagged him. I'm a savage. Yeah.
I've been watching cycling videos and finding myself in some deep YouTube wormholes. Comment below on the YouTube wormhole that you found yourself in. Of course, I've also been having some lows. We've all been having lows. For me, the low has taken the form of cracking out my old notes from when I was in college, and I've been reviewing my macroeconomics, studying the production possibilities frontier. I've been rewatching Stranger Things, which has been a lot of fun. Comment below on what you've been doing to avoid the lows and kill the time with quarantine. The next thing, there seems to be a hole in the academic realm of book reviews for baby books. So I'm going to try and fill that hole today. Today we are going to be doing a scholarly review of Never Touch a Dragon. Now, right off the bat, this book has a lot of pros, a lot of cons, but it's a solid book overall. It'll keep your baby entertained. The lesson is well said, well stated. You should never touch a dragon. This book clearly communicates that in a concise and persuasive manner. Other pros for the book is that it has a really tactile application and feel to it, which is ironic. It says never touch a dragon and yet provides opportunities to touch a dragon, like this rubbery front. It's got a great hand feel to it. Big, heavy, sturdy cardboard pages. It's a good book on the whole. It does have some cons on the whole. The poetic attempts are weak. In one point, it attempts to rhyme claws and indoors. It says you must never touch a dragon that has curly, curly claws. Distract it with a sandwich and then run away indoors. That's weak poetry. And then finally, the bibliography and the work cited is subpar to be considered serious academic work. On the whole, it's a solid book. Thought next we would move on to some news for New Mexico State. So there's a little bit of good news and bad news that came out of the university. First, the big news, of course, president of the university, he released on April 21st that NMSU will be resuming in-person classes, which is great news for all of us, especially for those of us who are in RUF. I know I'm super excited to see many of you again. One of the things that his press release did not mention was whether or not pants will be required in a post-quarantine academic environment. On April 23rd, there was some good news that came out. Since quarantine has gone into effect, the occurrences of graffiti on campus has had a significant decrease, which is good news on the whole. And it makes sense. The unfortunate thing is that in the midst of planning my giant RUF shield on Zool library, I realized that there's not really any point anymore because there's not really anybody to look at it. Bad news is that the Board of Trustees has voted to increase tuition by 3% for the new academic year, but they've also given a 0% increase in quality of education. Good news, though, is that the university is going to credit back students for parking and meal tickets and housing from the spring semester. The bad news is that there's a flow chart to determine your eligibility, which will as surely make sure that no one can possibly qualify for the return credit. I know for many of us, quarantine has had us thinking a lot. There's just tons of stuff to think about right now. There's tons of internet to be available. So what I thought we would talk about today is thinking. How do we think? And so today, let's talk about thinking. So with that, I invite you to think about thinking with me. Sort of the thing that makes us on the whole different from other creatures is that because we're made in the image of God, we are capable of thinking consciously, that we can think about what we're thinking, and we can think about how to think better, and we can think about how to think about how to think better. But I don't know if we can think about how to think about how to think about better. So stop that. So first of all, let's think about what thinking is not. Thinking is not necessarily by itself just acquiring more information. That would reduce humans to just being hard drives. That would basically say that education or thinking well is your capacity to just spit out information and data, which would basically make us no more than just computers. And we know that there's something more than that. Thinking is also not just going with your group. Sometimes it's really tempting to think that thinking is, as long as I'm thinking with this group of people, I'm thinking well. Sometimes it's tempting to think, as long as I'm not thinking like this group of people, I'm thinking well. I remember when I went to college, people would tell me, Jonathan, you have to learn to think for yourself, which normally meant that I had to think like them and not think like the person they don't like. Thinking is neither thinking against one group or against another group. What is thinking? How do we know what thinking is? First of all, thinking has to be communal. It has to be an ongoing conversation with other people. Very poor thinking happens in isolations. That's true of theology, that's true of philosophy, that's true of any realm of thinking. It has to happen in person. It has to happen through conversation with people who have gone before us in books. It can happen in internet, through Twitter and through Facebook. But the first thing is that it has to be communal and conversational. Second, thinking has to be rational and emotional. And that "and" is very important there. It's not just rational or it's not just emotional. If thinking is all rational, it becomes disastrous and it denies the human nature of thinking about emotions. There was actually a philosopher in the early times of thinking that said that motion is impossible. He said it's impossible to move, because he was thinking only rationally. Well, that's silly. If it's also just emotion, then it's also disastrous. Facebook rants, which are some of the most devoid of rational content you can possibly have. Thinking has to be emotion and reason combined. Third, thinking has to be character driven. There has to be a base value of what is right and what is wrong to think well. Thinking has to land on something that's true. There's a really wise old man in the 1900s who says that the mind is like a mouth. It can't stay open forever around a taco. It eventually has to close around a taco and land on something solid. Otherwise, it's just forever open and that just looks silly. You look weird. You have to land on truth eventually if you're going to think well. And also part of the character-driven nature of thinking is that it has to have a disposition of charity towards other humans, in love and in concern and dignity, at least towards their person and maybe towards their ideas. So what are some tips for you to think well in the midst of quarantine? First, I really encourage you to ask, what are your mental anchor points? And by that I mean, what are the things that you say, these are what I think are true and non-negotiable? We all have this thing that we say, this is true. Land on that and say, this is what I think is true, but then also be willing to ask questions of those things. For me as a Christian, I say those anchor points are the Trinity, that God is three persons in one, the incarnation, that Jesus is both God and man at the same time, and that Scripture is God's revelation of himself to us. Those are my anchor points. What are your anchor points? Think about those things and ask, why are they your anchor points? And then how do you think well based on those? Second, have multiple inputs of communities, have different ethnic and racial inputs, have different political inputs, have different religious inputs. No one wants to be the person who's in a cacophony of only hearing people who are like them think. Dare to venture out and listen to or subscribe to a YouTube video or a Twitter that's not like you and be challenged in how you think. Third, avoid othering. We all know what othering is. It's the attempt to say that they are bad and we are good. Part of this is just for the love for the other person. They're other human beings who, yes, they can think very differently from us. They can even think very poorly and even be wrong. But if they are made in God's image, they deserve at least dignity in what they are as persons and maybe even what they believe. And they probably have reasons for what they believe. So avoid othering. Third, cultivate humility. Are you willing to say, yeah, I could be wrong. I may not totally have this area of myself understood, this area of the world understood. Everyone all of a sudden became an expert in quarantine, even though none of us have studied quarantine. Could you be wrong? What's the thing that you're willing to say, I could be wrong on this? Or ask the question, what would it take to disprove what I believe? Why is that so? Finally, give it time. Thinking takes a lot of time. You're not going to come to understand a topic or an idea in 5 minutes, or in one book, or in one YouTube channel, or in 1 hour of thinking. So give it time. Join in conversation with other people. Heck, join me. I'm always interested in to think about something. I don't know much about a lot, but I'm willing to learn. That brings us to our final installment of Taco Talk today, which is do, watch, read, and listen, where we give you some ideas for what you can do in the coming days and weeks during quarantine. So first, do? Well, we've been making a lot of Rice Krispie treats. Drizzle some chocolate sauce on top and you've got a great quarantine snack. Watch. The RUF at University of Wisconsin has made some delightful fireside chats, and so I recommend that you go watch them. Read. I highly recommend this book by Alan Jacobs called How to Think. It's a short little book. It's only 150 pages. He gives great explanations of what thinking is and how you and I can improve in it. Finally, listen. All right, now this is a stretch, but hang with me. Pitbull has a new single out. It's killer. It's called I Believe We Will Win. Let me tell you, listen to this song loud once and you will be ready to kick punch coronavirus in the face 4 times. I guarantee it. Well, that does it for this week's installment of Taco Talks. Thanks for tuning in. We hope that you're well. We hope that you're hanging in there, and we'll see you next time. Have a great day.